be careful here, because everybody in this room believes they're busy, and I don't doubt it. You feel busy. You feel like there aren't enough hours in the day. You feel like if you just had a little more time, you'd finally get to the things that matter. The book, the business, the health, the relationships you've been meaning to tend to. But here's the question I want you to sit with. If you feel that way, and I know you do, then where is your time actually going? Because it's going somewhere. Time doesn't evaporate. Time doesn't disappear into thin air. Every hour you have is spent on something. And if you're not spending it on what matters, then you're spending it on something else. And you'd better find out what that something else is. Let me tell you what I've learned about time. And it took me a long while to learn it. Time isn't the problem. Time is never the problem. Everybody gets the same 24 hours. The wealthy and the broke. The accomplished and the stuck. The person building an empire and the person who can't seem to get off the couch. Same 24 hours. Every single day. So if the amount of time is identical for everyone, then time can't be the variable. The variable has to be something else. The variable is what you do with the time. And more specifically, the variable is how much of your time slips away without your permission. Because that's the real thief. Not the big obvious things. Not the emergencies or the demands or the responsibilities. Those things you see coming. You plan for those. The real thief is the small, invisible drain. The 5 minutes here. The 10 minutes there. The half hour you can't quite account for. The time you spent doing something you didn't even choose to do. I want to make you a promise tonight. And I don't make promises lightly. If you do what I'm about to describe, you will find 2 hours a day. 2 hours you didn't know you had. 2 hours that have been hiding in plain sight. Buried under habits so ordinary you never thought to question them. And 2 hours a day. That's not a small thing. That's 14 hours a week. That's over 700 hours a year. That's the equivalent of 18 full work weeks. You could learn a language in that time. You could build a business. You could transform your body. You could become an entirely different person. And it's just sitting there right now, waiting for you to claim it. Here's where most people go wrong. They think finding time means adding hours to the day, and you can't add hours to the day. Nobody can. So they give up before they start. They say, there just aren't enough hours, and they treat that like a law of nature, like gravity, like something they have no say in. But finding time was never about adding. It was always about subtracting. It was always about looking at where the time already goes and taking some of it back. You don't create 2 hours out of nothing. You reclaim 2 hours that were already yours, that you'd been giving away without realizing it. So let's talk about where it goes. And I want you to be honest with yourself as I walk through this, because the whole thing depends on your honesty. If you lie to yourself here, you'll walk out of this room with nothing. The first place your time goes is into the space between activities. Nobody talks about this. Everybody focuses on the activities themselves. But the real waste happens in the gaps. You finish one thing, and before you start the next thing, there's a pause, a drift, a moment where you're not doing anything in particular. And those moments, they add up in a way that would shock you. You finish a task, and instead of moving straight to the next one, you wander. You get a snack you didn't want. You stand up and look out the window. You start something and abandon it. You tell yourself you're taking a little break, but it's not a real break, because a real break restores you, and this just dissolves you. 10 minutes gone, and you do it 8, 10, 12 times a day. That's your first hour right there, gone into the cracks between the things you actually meant to do. The second place your time goes is into decisions you make over and over that you should have made once. Think about how much of your day you spend deciding. Deciding what to eat. Deciding what to wear. Deciding what to do first. deciding whether to do the hard thing now or later. Every one of those decisions costs you time, but more than time, it costs you energy. And the energy loss is even more expensive than the time loss. Because here's what happens. You wake up and you decide what to have for your first meal. Small decision, but it takes a few minutes and a little mental effort. Then you decide what to wear. Another few minutes. Then you sit down and you decide what to work on. And you turn it over and you weigh it and you second guess it. And by the time you've actually started, you've spent 20 minutes deciding, and you're already tired from the deciding. The person who has decided these things in advance doesn't lose that time or that energy. They already know what they're eating. They already know what they're wearing. They already know what they're doing first. And so they skip the entire negotiation and go straight to the doing. That's not a small advantage. That's the difference between someone who's exhausted by 10 in the morning and someone who's just getting started. The third place your time goes, and this is the big one, this is the one nobody wants to face, is into the things you do to escape. And I'm not going to name them because you know what yours are. Everybody's got them. The little rituals of avoidance you reach for when the real work feels like too much. The idle entertainment, the mindless drift. The activity that isn't rest and isn't work and isn't anything at all except a way to make the hours disappear so you don't have to sit with the discomfort of what you're not doing. And I want to be clear about this because I don't want you to hear judgment where I mean to offer help. There's nothing wrong with rest. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. There's nothing wrong with doing something for pure enjoyment. But you have to know the difference between choosing to relax and drifting into escape. Because one of those refills you and the other one empties you, and they can look almost identical from the outside. Real rest is intentional. You choose it, you enjoy it, and you feel better afterward. Escape is unintentional. You slide into it without deciding, you don't even really enjoy it. And afterward, you feel worse because now you've lost the time and you've still got the discomfort you were trying to avoid. Plus, a new layer of guilt on top. Most people spend somewhere between 1 and 3 hours a day in escape and call it rest. And they'd swear to you they don't have time. They'd tell you with complete sincerity that their days are packed, and they are packed. Packed with escape dressed up as relaxation, avoidance dressed up as a break. So let's do the math, because I always want you to see the numbers. If you lose an hour a day to the gaps between activities, and you lose half an hour a day to redundant decisions, and you lose 30 minutes to escape you didn't even want, that's 2 hours right there. 2 hours every single day gone. And not one of those 2 hours went to anything you'd be proud of. Not one of them went to rest that restored you or work that built something. They just leaked out. That's the 2 hours I promised you. It was there the whole time. You just couldn't see it because it was never lost in big chunks. It was lost in fragments so small that each one seemed harmless. Now here's what I want you to understand about those fragments, because this is the heart of it. The fragments are more dangerous than the big losses, precisely because they're small. If you lost 2 hours all at once in one solid block, you'd notice. You'd be alarmed. You'd say, "Where did my afternoon go?" And you'd do something about it. But you don't lose it that way. You lose it a few minutes at a time, spread across the whole day, so no single loss ever crosses the threshold of your attention. And because you never notice the individual losses, you never add them up. And because you never add them up, you go on believing you simply don't have the time. When the truth is, you've had the time all along. You've just been bleeding it out through 100 tiny cuts. Let me tell you about a young man I knew years ago. He came to me convinced he needed to quit his job to pursue what he really wanted to do. He said he just couldn't find the hours. He said between the work and the commute and the obligations, there was nothing left. And he wanted my blessing to make a dramatic change, to blow up his whole life so he could finally have time. And I told him, before you blow anything up, let's find out where your time actually goes. So I asked him to do something simple. For 1 week, I asked him to write down what he did with every half hour of his day. Not to change anything, just to record it, to become a witness to his own life. He came back a week later, and he was quiet, and I could see something had shifted in him. Because when he added it all up, he found 3 hours a day he couldn't account for. 3 hours, not spent on his job, not spent on his commute, not spent on any obligation, just gone. Dissolved into a fog of small activities he couldn't even remember doing. He didn't need to quit his job. He needed to stop lying to himself about where his time went. And once he saw it, once he really saw it in his own handwriting, he couldn't pretend anymore. That's the power of witnessing. You cannot fix what you refuse to see, and you cannot help but fix what you finally do see. So that's the first thing I want you to do. Before you try to change a single habit, before you build a single new routine, I want you to become a witness to your own time. For 1 week, write down what you do with every half hour. Don't judge it. Don't fix it. Just record it. Because until you see the leak, you'll keep bailing water and wondering why the boat keeps sinking. Now, once you can see where the time goes, the next question becomes what to do about it. And this is where I have to correct a mistake that almost everybody makes. When people discover they've been wasting time, their first instinct is to attack the waste directly. They say, I'm going to stop doing the thing that wastes my time. And they white-knuckle it for a few days, and then they collapse right back into the old pattern. Because you can't beat a habit by fighting it. You beat a habit by replacing it. A habit is filling a need, even a bad habit, even a wasteful one. And if you just tear it out without putting something in its place, you leave a hole, and that hole will pull the old habit right back in. The escape you reach for isn't there for no reason. It's there because at that moment, you needed something. You needed a break or a distraction or a way to lower the pressure. And if you just forbid yourself the escape without addressing the need doesn't go away. It just sits there, growing louder until you cave. So the goal isn't to eliminate. The goal is to redirect. You take the time you were losing and you point it somewhere better. You don't fight the drift. You give the drift a destination. Let me show you how this works with the gaps between activities. That first hour we talked about. The reason you drift in the gaps is that you finish a task and you don't know what comes next. So your mind reaches for the easiest available thing, which is usually the most wasteful thing. The solution isn't to force yourself not to drift. The solution is to know what comes next before you finish the thing you're doing. The person who doesn't waste time in the gaps has a plan. When they finish one task, they already know exactly what the next task is because they decided it in advance. There's no gap for the drift to fill because the moment one thing ends, the next thing begins. The transition is seamless. There's no open space for the waste to rush into. That's the whole trick. You don't have to fight the drift if you don't leave it any room. Drift can only happen in empty space. Fill the space with a plan, and the drift has nowhere to go. Now let's talk about that second loss, the time you lose to making the same decisions over and over. The answer here is to decide once instead of deciding daily. And I want you to really understand the power of this because it goes far beyond just saving a few minutes. Every decision you make draws from the same well, and that well is not bottomless. You have a certain amount of decision-making capacity each day, and every choice you make, no matter how small, draws a little bit out of that well. Decide what to eat. Draw a little. Decide what to wear. Draw a little. Decide what to do first. Draw a little. And by the time you get to the decisions that actually matter, the well is running low, and you make poor choices, or you avoid choosing altogether, which is itself a choice, and usually the worst one. But the decisions you make once in advance don't draw from that daily well. When you decide on Sunday what you'll eat all week, you spend the decision-making capacity once, and you're done. When you decide the night before what you'll wear and what you'll work on, those decisions are already made, and they cost you nothing the next day. You wake up with a full well, and you get to spend all of it on the things that deserve it. This is why the most accomplished people you'll ever meet often live the most boring routines. They eat the same things. They wear similar clothes. They do things in the same order every day. And people look at that and think it's rigid or joyless or somehow limiting. But it's exactly the opposite. They've automated the trivial so they can pour all their creativity and energy into what matters. They've made their lives boring in the small things so their lives can be extraordinary in the big things. Now, the third loss, the escape. This is the hardest one because it's tied to something deeper than time management. The escape is usually a response to discomfort. The work feels hard, so you escape. The task feels overwhelming, so you escape. And you can't solve that with a schedule because the schedule doesn't address the discomfort. The discomfort is the real problem, and the escape is just the symptom. So here's what you do. When you catch yourself reaching for the escape, I want you to pause and ask one question. What am I trying to avoid right now? Because you're always trying to avoid something. And the answer is almost never as scary as the avoidance made it seem. Usually you're avoiding the discomfort of starting something hard. And starting something hard is uncomfortable for about 90 seconds, and then it's fine. The escape promises to save you from the discomfort, but it doesn't. It just delays the discomfort and adds interest. Because the work still has to get done, and now you have less time to do it, and now you've got the guilt of the wasted hour on top of the original discomfort. The escape never actually escapes anything. It just moves the pain into the future and makes it bigger. When you understand that, when you really understand that the escape is a bad trade every single time, you start to lose your appetite for it. Not through willpower, through clarity. You see it for what it is, and you stop wanting it the way you'd stop wanting a business deal once you finally saw the terms. Now, I want to give you something practical, something you can start using tomorrow morning. I call it the anchor. The reason your time slips away is that your day has no structure to hold it in place. It's like water without a container. It just spreads out and evaporates. The anchor gives your day a container. Here's how it works. You pick a small number of fixed points in your day, and you build everything else around them. Not a rigid minute-by-minute schedule, just a few anchors. You wake at the same time. You do your most important work at the same time. You eat at roughly the same times. You end your day at the same time. These anchors don't fill your whole day, but they hold it in shape. The way the posts of a fence hold up the whole fence, even though there's space between them. And here's the beautiful thing about anchors. They eliminate the drift automatically. When you have a fixed point coming up, you can't drift indefinitely because the anchor is waiting. If you know your most important work starts at 9, then you can't let the morning dissolve because 9 is coming whether you're ready or not. The anchor pulls you forward. It gives the shapeless morning a shape. Most people live with no anchors at all. They wake at a different time every day. They work whenever they feel like it. They eat whenever hunger strikes. And so their days have no shape, and time flows through them like water through open hands. Put a few anchors in place, and suddenly the water has somewhere to gather. Suddenly you have structure, and structure is what turns lost time into found time. Let me tell you about a woman I once knew who ran a household and a small business at the same time, and she seemed to accomplish twice what anyone else did. And I asked her once how she managed it. And she told me something I've never forgotten. She said, I don't manage my time. I manage my energy, and I let my energy manage my time. And what she meant was this. She knew when she had the most energy, and she guarded that time fiercely. She did her hardest, most important work during her highest energy hours, and she refused to let anything trivial touch those hours. And she scheduled her low-value tasks, the errands, the busy work, the routine chores, for her low-energy hours, when she couldn't do anything demanding anyway. Most people do exactly the opposite. They spend their best hours on their worst tasks. They wake up fresh, full of energy, and they immediately spend that precious energy on trivial things. They handle the little tasks, the easy tasks, the tasks that don't matter, and they save the important work for later, when they're depleted and drained and can barely think straight. And then they wonder why the important work never gets done well or never gets done at all. You have to match your best energy to your most important work. That's not a small adjustment. That could double your output without adding a single minute to your day, because it's not just about how much time you have. It's about what quality of time you spend on what. An hour of your peak energy is worth 3 hours of your depleted energy. So spend your peak on what matters, and you've effectively multiplied your time. Now, I want to address something, because I know some of you are thinking it. You're thinking, but my time isn't my own. I have a job, I have children, I have obligations. I can't just build my day however I want. And I understand that. I understand that some of your hours are genuinely spoken for. Nobody's asking you to abandon your responsibilities. But here's what I've found. Even the busiest person, the one with the most obligations, the one who swears they don't have a single free minute, even that person has time that's genuinely their own. It's just fragmented and hidden. It's the early morning before the house wakes. It's the pockets between commitments. It's the evening after the work is done. It's there. It's always there. The question is whether you'll claim it or let it leak away like all the rest. And I'll tell you something else. The people with the most obligations are often the ones who use their time the best, precisely because they have so little of it. Scarcity creates focus. It's the person with unlimited time who wastes the most, because they figure they'll get to it later, and later never comes. Give a person a full day to do one task, and they'll take the whole day. Give them an hour, and they'll get it done in an hour. The constraint isn't your enemy. Handled right, the constraint is your greatest ally. So if you have limited time, don't mourn it. Use it. The limits will force you to be efficient in a way that unlimited time never would. The person who has only 1 free hour a day and uses it fully will accomplish more over a year than the person who has 4 free hours and wastes them. Let me give you the full picture of what a reclaimed day actually looks like, because I think seeing it makes it real. This person wakes at their anchor time, the same time every day, no negotiation, because they decided that long ago, and it's not up for debate anymore. They don't drift in bed. They don't lie there flipping through their thoughts. They get up, and their first hour is already planned, so there's no gap for the drift to fill. They do their most important work during their highest energy hours, because they've matched their energy to their priorities. They're not spending their best mental hours on trivial nonsense. They're spending them on what matters. And they've protected those hours like a treasure, because that's exactly what they are. The small decisions have already been made. What they're eating, what they're wearing, what comes next. So there's no draining negotiation. No depleting of the well on things that don't deserve it. They flow from one thing to the next because they know what the next thing is. The transitions are seamless. There are no gaps for the waste to rush into. When the urge to escape shows up, and it does show up because it shows up for everyone, they notice it. They ask themselves what they're avoiding. And they recognize the escape for the bad trade it is, and they let it pass and they keep working. Not through gritted teeth, through clarity. They simply don't want the bad trade anymore. And at the end of the day, they take 10 minutes and they decide tomorrow. They set their anchors. They choose their most important tasks. They make the small decisions in advance so tomorrow's well starts full. And then they rest. Real rest. Intentional rest. Rest they chose and rest that restores them because they're no longer confusing rest with escape. And that person, at the end of a year, has found their 2 hours a day, 700 hours. And they've poured those 700 hours into something that matters. And they've become someone that the person who kept leaking time could never become. Not because they had more hours, but because they refused to let the hours they had slip through their fingers. Now, I don't want you to hear all this and feel overwhelmed, like you have to change everything at once. That's not how it works. That's not how anything works. You don't reclaim 2 hours in a single day. You reclaim them the same way you lost them, gradually in small pieces. Start with the witnessing. Just for 1 week, write down where your time goes. Don't change anything yet. Just see it. Because that alone, that seeing, will do half the work for you. Once you can see the leak, you'll find it almost impossible to ignore. The awareness itself begins to close the gap. Then pick one leak, just one. Maybe it's the gaps between activities. Maybe it's the redundant decisions. Maybe it's the escape. Pick the biggest one, the one that's costing you the most, and address just that. Put a plan in the gaps, or decide the small things in advance, or install an anchor. Just one change. Master it. Let it become automatic, and then move to the next. Because here's the truth about reclaiming your time. It's not about a dramatic overhaul. It's not about becoming a completely different person overnight. It's about a series of small, deliberate adjustments, each one closing a leak, each one reclaiming a few minutes, until the few minutes add up to the 2 hours that were always there. And the 2 hours are always there. I want you to hold on to that, because it's the most hopeful thing I can tell you. You are not short on time. You have never been short on time. You have exactly as much time as every accomplished person who ever lived. The difference was never the amount. The difference was the stewardship. The difference was that they guarded their hours and you gave yours away. They saw where their time went and you never looked. They built structure and you lived in the fog. And every one of those differences is a difference you can close, starting tomorrow morning, starting with your very next hour. So here's what I want you to do. Tonight, before you sleep, decide one thing. Decide what your first anchor will be. Just one. What time will you wake, and what will you do in that first hour? Decide it now, when your mind is clear, when the emotions of tomorrow morning haven't arrived yet. Write it down, and then honor it, not because you'll feel like it, but because you decided it. And when tomorrow comes, and the drift tries to pull you back into the fog, when the escape whispers that there's no rush, when the small decisions try to drain your well, you'll have one fixed point to hold on to, one anchor, one decision already made. And that one anchor will begin to give your day a shape. And a day with a shape holds its time instead of spilling it. You have more time than you think. I told you that at the start, and I'll tell you again now. But this time, I hope it lands differently. It's not a comfort, it's a challenge. Because if you have more time than you think, then the life you say you want is more available than you've been telling yourself. The book is writable. The business is buildable. The health is reachable. The relationships are mendable. They were never out of reach because of time. They were out of reach because of what you did with the time. And that, unlike the number of hours in a day, is something you have complete power to change. The clock you cannot argue with. But what you pour into the clock, that has always been yours to decide. It's yours right now. It's yours tomorrow morning. And the moment you start treating your hours like the treasure they are, instead of the small change you've been carelessly spending, is the moment you discover that you were never poor in time at all. You were only careless with a fortune you didn't know you had.